Sandra was a young woman living in the bustling city of Lagos, Nigeria. She was known for her bright smile, kind heart, and big dreams. Sandra always believed in fairy tales and happy endings, and she hoped to find her Prince Charming one day. One sunny afternoon, Sandra met Frank at a friend's party. Frank was tall, handsome, and very charming. He had a warm smile and was very polite. Frank worked as a successful businessman, and he seemed to have everything Sandra had ever dreamed of in a husband. Frank was very nice to Sandra. He took her out to fancy restaurants, bought her beautiful gifts, and always made her feel special. Sandra felt like she was living in a dream. After a few months of dating, Frank asked Sandra to marry him. He gave her a beautiful diamond ring, and Sandra, feeling like the luckiest girl in the world, said yes. At first, Sandra and Frank's marriage was wonderful. They moved into a big, beautiful house, and Frank continued to spoil Sandra with love and gifts. Sandra was very happy and felt like her life was perfect. But soon, things began to change. Frank started to become very controlling. He didn't want Sandra to go out with her friends or see her family. He said that they didn't understand their love and that she should only focus on him. Frank's words, once sweet, started to become mean and hurtful. He would criticize Sandra for everything she did. He told her that she was stupid and worthless. Sandra felt very sad and confused. She didn't understand why Frank was treating her this way. One night, after a small argument, Frank hit Sandra for the first time. Sandra was shocked and scared. She couldn't believe that the man she loved could hurt her like that. Frank apologized and promised that it would never happen again, but it did. The hitting became more frequent, and Frank's anger seemed to have no limits. As if the emotional and physical abuse wasn't enough, Frank started to show a dark side of himself. He began to bring home strange objects and perform bizarre rituals. He said these rituals were important for his success and their protection. Frank would light candles and chant strange words. He would make Sandra participate in these rituals, even though she didn't understand them and felt very scared. Frank's fetish practices added another layer of fear to Sandra's already terrible life. Sandra felt trapped. She was too scared to leave, and she didn't know who to turn to. She felt alone and hopeless, her bright spirit crushed under the weight of fear and pain. One night, after a particularly brutal beating, Sandra lay on the cold bathroom floor, crying. She looked at herself in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. Her once bright eyes were now filled with sadness and fear. Her body was covered in bruises, and her spirit was broken. But deep inside, a small spark of hope remained. Sandra knew she couldn't live like this anymore. She had to leave before Frank's violence consumed her completely. Gathering all the strength she had left, Sandra decided to escape. Sandra secretly contacted her old friend, Amora. Amora was shocked to hear what Sandra had been going through. She promised to help Sandra and offered her a safe place to stay. They made a plan for Sandra to leave when Frank went to work. The next morning, with her heart pounding, Sandra packed a small bag and slipped out of the house. She felt a mixture of fear and hope as she walked away from the nightmare her life had become. Leaving Frank was only the beginning of Sandra's journey. The emotional and psychological scars ran deep. Sandra struggled with anxiety, depression, and a profound sense of worthlessness. She felt like she was broken and didn't know how to put herself back together. Sandra decided to seek help from a therapist. The therapist was kind and patient, guiding Sandra through the process of healing. They talked about everything Sandra had been through, and slowly, Sandra began to understand that none of it was her fault. The therapist introduced Sandra to a support group for survivors of domestic abuse. Meeting other women who had gone through similar experiences helped Sandra feel less alone. She shared her story and listened to theirs, finding strength in their courage and resilience. Sandra also started volunteering at a local shelter, helping other women who were escaping abusive situations. Helping others gave Sandra a sense of purpose and made her feel strong. She began to see herself as a survivor, not a victim. Through her journey of healing, Sandra discovered a passion for writing. She began to write about her experiences, channeling her pain and memories into powerful stories. Writing became a way for Sandra to express her feelings and heal her wounds. Sandra's stories were filled with emotion and honesty. People who read them were deeply moved and inspired. Her work gained recognition, and she became a voice for those who had suffered in silence. Sandra's writing helped many people understand the impact of domestic abuse and the importance of speaking out. Sandra's newfound purpose and passion for writing gave her life new meaning. She felt strong and confident, and she knew that she was on the right path. Meanwhile, Frank's life was beginning to fall apart. Without Sandra to control and abuse, his anger and paranoia grew. His business started to suffer, and his once charming facade crumbled. Frank's fetish practices became more erratic, and people around him began to distance themselves. One day, Frank received a visit from the police. Sandra had bravely decided to press charges against him. With the support of her therapist and friends, she provided evidence of the abuse she had endured. Frank was arrested and faced a trial that exposed his true nature to the world. The trial was tough, but Sandra stood strong. She spoke about everything Frank had done to her, and her voice was unwavering. The evidence was overwhelming, and Frank was found guilty of multiple charges, including assault and emotional abuse. He was sentenced to a long prison term, where he had plenty of time to think about his actions. With Frank behind bars, Sandra felt a sense of closure. She had faced her abuser and reclaimed her life. Her journey was far from over, but she was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, a warrior who had fought for her freedom and won. Sandra continued to write and speak out about domestic abuse. She dedicated her life to helping others find the strength to leave abusive relationships. She founded an organization that provided resources and support for survivors, creating a network of hope and empowerment. Years later, Sandra met a kind and compassionate man named David. Unlike Frank, David treated her with the love and respect she deserved. They built a life together based on trust, mutual support, and genuine affection. Sandra had finally found her happily ever after, not through a fairy tale romance, but through her resilience and strength. Sandra's story became a beacon of hope for many. Her courage to leave an abusive relationship, her dedication to healing, and her commitment to helping others created a legacy of strength and empowerment. She proved that even in the darkest of times, there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. Frank, filled with regret and bitterness, spent his days in prison reflecting on his actions. He had lost everything: his freedom, his business, and the woman who had once loved him. His life became a cautionary tale of how abuse and cruelty lead to one's downfall. Sandra's journey was a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of self-love. She had transformed her pain into purpose, emerging from the shadows of abuse to shine brightly as a symbol of hope and strength. Her story reminded everyone that no matter how deep the wounds, healing and happiness were always within reach.